Good evening, my beautiful brothers and sisters in Yeshua. Today is Tuesday, the 14th of November 2023. It is 9:24 p.m. here in Australia. I hope you're doing well. I hope you're doing blessed. Wow, I just realized it's 9:24 p.m. And actually, I want to talk about the 24th day of the ninth month. So that's incredible that I started this video at 9:24. So, brothers and sisters, first I want to give a shout out to my brother Steve Fletcher here, who put out this video called Hanukkah and the Baby, Hanukkah Rapture Watch, December 7th to 17th, 2023. Incredible video, go over and check it out, it's amazing. So I basically want to add some things onto this video because Hanukkah has always been a very, very high watch period for me as well, and I know there is this very significant reason why they took the book of Maccabees out of the scriptures. So tonight, brothers and sisters, I want to read for you the first book of Maccabees, and we're going to see where the original Abomination of Desolation comes from. And I think it's very telling because this is the one thing that we're supposed to be looking out for when we see the Abomination of Desolation. You know, those in Judea to flee to the mountains. So we're in the time frame, we're in the season, so I think it'd be very wise to check out where this Abomination of Desolation is coming from. And the Abomination of Desolation happens to be why Hanukkah came about. This is literally what Hanukkah is about. It's about rededicating the temple that was polluted. So we can also see in Haggai 2, chapter 2 here, and this is the New Living Translation, and I like this one because it gives the actual Gregorian dates, so it makes it a little bit more interesting. So we see that we have down here in verse 20, we have the promises to Zerubbabel. On that same day, December 18th, the Lord sent this message to Haggai. Tell Zerubbabel, the governor of Judah, that I am about to shake the heavens and the earth, and I will overthrow royal thrones and destroy the powers of foreign kingdoms. I will overturn their chariots and riders, and the horses will fall, and their riders will kill each other. But when this happens, says the Lord of heaven's armies, I will honor you, Zerubbabel, son of Shealtiel, my servant. I will make you like a signet ring on my finger, says the Lord, for I have chosen you. I, the Lord of heaven's armies, have spoken. So here we have a Gregorian date of December 18th, and I think that's going to be an incredibly high watch period, all of December, right up until the 31st. You know, it's got to be this year. It literally has to be this year. You know, it's going to be very hard if December 31st is going to come and go. And anyway, we're not going to think about that. We're going to encourage each other with what we can see now, what Father is revealing now. And like I said, go check out Steve's video because that's pretty cool, right? Very encouraging. So, as you can see here, the 24th day of the ninth month. And so you can see here, because I know it said that December the 18th, but just when you go down here, there's a little footnote here, okay? So on that same day, December 18th, so Haggai 2 verse 20, you can see down here, 2 verse 20, is the 24th day of the ninth month. So that's what we're looking at, and that's what Hanukkah is on. It is on the 24th, as you can see here, of Kislev. So the 24th day of the ninth month is the first day of Hanukkah. So with that being said, let's jump into Op. And before I forget, in John chapter 10, we start up here in verse 22. And it was at Jerusalem the feast of dedication, and it was winter. And Jesus walked in the temple of Solomon's porch, and then the Jews round about him and said to him, How long do you make us doubt? If you be the Christ, tell us plainly. Jesus answered them, I told you, and you believe me not. The works that I do is in my Father's name, and they bear witness of me. So we can see here the feast of dedication, which is Hanukkah, was literally the only feast Yeshua Jesus Christ attended. So it's very important, very, very important time. So with that being said, let's jump into First Maccabees and let's read the story of where the Abomination of Desolation happened on the 24th day of the 9th month. And here you can see this is Antiochus Epiphanes. This is the main player in all of this. A very, very evil man. And so let's get into it. After Alexander, son of Philip, the Macedonian, who came from the land of Chittim, had defeated Darius, king of the Persians and the Medes, he succeeded him as a king. He had previously become the king of Greece. He fought many battles, conquered strongholds, and put to death the kings of the earth. He advanced to the ends of the earth and plundered many nations. When the earth became quiet before him, he was exalted, and his heart was lifted up. Now, I'm just going to stop there. I mean, straight away we have connection with 2 Thessalonians, His heart was exalted and he was lifted up. Okay, he wanted to be like God. He wanted to sit in the throne of God. So this guy is very much in the spirit of the Antichrist. He gathered a very strong army and ruled over countries, nations, and princes, and they became tributary to him. After this he fell sick and perceived that he was dying. So he summoned his most honoured officers, who had been brought up with him from youth, and he divided his kingdom among them while he was still alive. And after Alexander, and mind you, this is Alexander the Great, by the way, and after Alexander had reigned 12 years, he died. Then his officers began to rule, each in his own place. They all put on crowns after his death, and so did their sons after them for many years. And they caused many evils on the earth. From them came a sinful root, Antiochus Epiphanes, the son of Antiochus the king. He had been a hostage in Rome. He began to reign in 137 years of the kingdom of the Greeks. In those days, lawless men came forth from Israel and misled many, saying, "Let us go and make a covenant with the Gentiles round about us, for since we separated from them, many evils have come upon us." This proposal pleased them, and some of the people eagerly went to the king. He authorized them to observe the ordinances of the Gentiles. So they built a gymnasium in Jerusalem according to the Gentile custom, and removed the marks of circumcision, and abandoned the holy covenant. They joined with the Gentiles and sold themselves to do evil. When Antiochus saw that his kingdom was established, he determined to become king of the land of Egypt, that he might reign over both kingdoms. So he invaded Egypt with a strong force, with chariots and elephants, and cavalry with a large fleet. He engaged Ptolemy, king of Egypt, in battle, and Ptolemy turned and fled before him, and many were wounded and fell. And they captured the fortified cities in the land of Egypt, and he plundered the land of Egypt. After subduing Egypt, Antiochus returned in the 143rd year. He went up to Israel and came to Jerusalem with a strong force. He arrogantly entered the sanctuary and took the golden altar, the lampstand for light, and all of its utensils. He took also the table for the bread of the presence, the cups for drink offerings, the bowls, the golden censers, the curtains, the crown, and the gold decorations on the front of the temple. He stripped it all off. He took the silver and the gold and the costly vessels, and he took also the hidden treasures which he found. Taking them all, he departed to his own land, and he committed deeds of murder, and he spoke with great arrogance. Israel mourned deeply in every community. Rulers and elders groaned, maidens and young men became faint. The beauty of women faded. Every bridegroom took up the lament. She who sat in the bridal chamber was mourning. Even the land shook for its inhabitants, and all the house of Jacob was clothed with shame. 2 years later, the king sent to the cities of Judah a chief collector of tribute, and he came to Jerusalem with a large force. Deceitfully he spoke peaceable words to them, and they believed him. But he suddenly fell upon the city, dealt it a severe blow, and destroyed many people of Israel. He plundered the city, burnt it with fire, and tore down its houses and surrounding walls. And they took captive the women and the children, and seized the cattle. Then they fortified the city of David with a great strong wall and a strong tower, and it became their cathedral. And they stationed there a sinful people, lawless men. These strengthened their position. They stored up arms and food, and collecting the spoils of Jerusalem, they stored there and became a great snare. It became an ambush against the sanctuary, an evil adversary of Israel continually. On every side of the sanctuary they shed innocent blood. They even defiled the sanctuary. Because of them the residents of Jerusalem fled. She became a dwelling of strangers. She became strange to her offspring, and her children forsook her. Her sanctuary became desolate as a desert. Her feasts were turned into mourning, her Sabbath into a reproach, her honour into contempt. Wow. Her feasts were turned into mourning, brothers and sisters. Is that not what's written in Amos chapter 8? That's the first time I've just realised that. Her Sabbath into reproach and her honour into contempt. Her dishonour now grew as great as her glory. Her exaltation was turned into mourning. Then the king wrote to his whole kingdom that all should be one people, New World Order, and that each should give up his custom. All the Gentiles accepted the commands of the king. Even many from Israel gladly adopted his religion. They sacrificed to idols and profaned the Sabbath. And the king sent letters by the messengers to Jerusalem and the cities of Judah. He directed them to follow customs strange to the land, to forbid burnt offerings and sacrifices and drink offerings in the sanctuary, to profane Sabbaths and feasts, to defile the sanctuary and the priests, to build altars and sacred precincts and shrines for idols, to sacrifice swine and unclean animals, and to leave their sons uncircumcised. They were to make themselves abominable by everything unclean and profane, so that they should forget the law and change all the ordinances. And whoever does not obey the command of the king shall die. In such words he wrote to the whole kingdom, and he appointed inspectors over all the people and commanded the cities of Judah to offer sacrifice city by city. Many of the people, every one who forsook the law, joined them, and they did evil in the land. They drove Israel into hiding in every place of refuge they had. All right, so now we're going to get into where Hanukkah comes in. So, now on the 15th day of Kislev, okay, the 15th day of Kislev, so that would be on the Jewish calendar. The 15th day of Kislev will be the 28th of November. 28th of November, that's the 15th day of Kislev. Now on the 15th day of Kislev, in the 145th year, they erected a desolating sacrilege upon the altar of burnt offering. They also built altars in the surrounding cities of Judah. So what they actually did was they erected a statue of Zeus. That's what they did in the temple, brothers and sisters, on the 15th day of Kislev, the 28th of November. And they burned incense at the door of the houses and in the streets. And the books of the law which they found they tore to pieces and burned with fire. Where the book of the covenant was found in possession of anyone, or anyone who adhered to the law, the decree of the king condemned him to death. They kept using violence against Israel, against those found month after month in the cities. And on the 25th day of the month, so the 25th day of Kislev, which is the 8th of December there. And on the 25th day of the month, they offered a sacrifice on the altar, which was upon the altar of burnt offering. Now that was a pig. They slaughtered a pig on the altar, brothers and sisters, and they used that blood They wiped the blood with the Torah scrolls and on all the curtains of the building, and they just profaned the temple big time. Okay, so on the 25th day of the month, they offered a sacrifice on the altar, which was upon the altar of burnt offering. According to the decree, they put to death the women who had their children circumcised, and their families, and those who circumcised them, and they hung infants from their mothers' necks. But many in Israel stood firm and were resolved in their heart not to eat unclean food. They chose to die rather than to defile by food or profane the holy covenant, and they did die. And a very great wrath came upon Israel. So before I jump into chapter 2, as you can see, this guy was very wicked. He overthrew Egypt and then set his sights onto Israel. And pretty much 98% of Israel just went with this guy and did profane things and horrible things. Okay, so now we're going to get into the goodness. In those days, Mattathias, the son of John, son of Simeon, a priest of the sons of Jarib, moved from Jerusalem and settled in Modin. He had 5 sons: John, surnamed Gadi; Simon was Thassi; Judas was Maccabeus; Eleazar called Avaran; and Jonathan called Appas. He saw the blasphemies being committed in Judah and Jerusalem, and said, "Alas, why was I born to see this, the ruin of my people, the ruin of the holy city, and to dwell there when it was given over to the enemy, the sanctuary given over to aliens? Her temple has become like a man without honor. Her glorious vessels have been carried into captivity. Her babes have been killed in the street, her youth by the sword of the foe. What nation has not inherited her palaces and not seized her spoils? All of her adornment has been taken away, no longer free. She has become a slave. And behold, our holy place, our beauty, and our glory has been laid waste. The Gentiles have profaned it. Why should we live any longer?" And Mattathias and his sons rent their clothes and put on sackcloth and mourned greatly. Then the king's officers who were enforcing the apostasy came to the city of Modin to make them offer sacrifice. Oh, I just got to stop there for a sec. Then the king's officers who were enforcing the apostasy, maybe that's got something to do with 2 Thessalonians, and when that day will not come until the apostasia happens first, okay, and that man of sin be revealed. So that might be very interesting. Okay, many from Israel came to them, and Mattathias and his sons were assembled. Then the king's officers spoke to Mattathias as followed: "You are a leader, honoured and great in the city, and supported by the sons and brothers. Now, be the first to come and do what the king commands, as all of the Gentiles and the men of Judah and those that are left in Jerusalem have done. Then you and your sons will be numbered among the friends of the king, and you and your sons will be honoured with silver and gold and many gifts." But Mattathias answered and said in a loud voice, "Even if all the nations that live under the rule of the king obey him, and have chosen to do his commandments, departing each one from the religion of his fathers, yet I and my sons and my brothers will live by the covenant of our fathers. Far be it from us to desert the law of the ordinances. We will not obey the king's word by turning aside from our religion to the right hand or to the left." When he had finished speaking these words, a Jew came forward in the sight of all to offer sacrifice upon the altar in Modin, according to the king's command. When Mattathias saw it, he burned with zeal, and his heart was stirred. He gave vent to righteous anger, and he ran and killed him upon the altar. At the same time he killed the king's officer who was forcing them to sacrifice, and he tore down the altar. Thus he burned with zeal for the law, and as Phinehas did against Zimri, the son of Zalu. Then Mattathias cried out with the city with a loud voice, saying, "Let everyone who is zealous for the law and support the covenant come with me." And he said to his sons, and he and his sons fled to the hill, flee to the mountains, and left all that they had in the city. Then many who were seeking righteousness and justice went down to the wilderness to dwell there. They, their sons, their wives, their cattle, because evil pressed heavily upon them. And it was reported to the king's officers and to the troops of Jerusalem, the city of David, that men who had rejected the king's command had gone down to the hiding places in the wilderness. Many pursued them and overtook them, and they encamped opposite them and prepared for battle against them on the Sabbath day. Does that not remind you of what happened, brothers and sisters? On the Sabbath day, the Jews were attacked on the 7th of October, 2023. And they said to him, "Enough of this, come out and do what the king commands, and you will live." But they said, "We will not come out, nor will we do what the king commands, and so profane the Sabbath day." Then the enemy hastened to attack them. And they did not answer them, or hurl a stone, or block them from their hiding places. For they said, "Let us all die in our innocence. Heaven and earth testify for us that you are killing us unjustly." So they attacked them on the Sabbath, and they died, with their wives and children and cattle, to the number of 1,000 persons. When Mattathias and his friends learned of it, they mourned for them deeply. And each said to his neighbour, "If we all do as our brethren have done and refuse to fight with the Gentiles for our lives and for our ordinances, they will quickly destroy us from the earth." So they made this decision that day: "Let us fight against every man who comes to attack us on the Sabbath day. Let us not all die as our brethren died in their hiding places." Then there united with them a company of Hasadeans, mighty warriors of Israel, everyone who offered himself willingly for the law. And all who became fugitives to escape their troubles joined them and reinforced them. They organized an army and struck down sinners in their anger and lawless men in their wrath. The survivors fled to the Gentiles for safety. And Mattathias and his friends went about and tore down the altars. They forcibly circumcised all the uncircumcised boys they found within the borders of Israel. They hunted down the arrogant men, and the work prospered in their hands. They rescued the law out of the hands of the Gentiles and the king, and they never let the sinner gain the upper hand. Now the days drew near for Mattathias to die, and he said to his sons, "Arrogance and reproach have now become strong. It is a time for ruin and furious anger. Now, my children, show zeal for the law and give your lives for the covenant of our fathers. Remember the deeds of the fathers, which they did in their generations, and received great honour and everlasting name. Was not Abraham found faithful when tested, and it was reckoned to him as righteousness? Joseph, in the time of his distress, kept the commandment and became Lord of Egypt. Phinehas, our father, because he was deeply zealous, received the covenant of everlasting priesthood. Joshua, because he was fulfilled with the command, became the judge in Israel. Caleb, because he testified in the assembly, received an inheritance in the land. David, because he was merciful, inherited the throne of the kingdom forever. Elijah, because of great zeal for the law, was taken up to heaven. Hananiah, Azariah, and Mishael believed they were saved from the flames. Daniel, because of his innocence, was delivered from the mouth of the lions. And so, observe from generation to generation that none who put their trust in him will lack strength. Do not fear the words of the sinner, for his splendor will turn into dung and worms. Today he will be exalted, but tomorrow he will not be found, because he has returned to the dust, and his plans will perish. My children, be courageous and grow strong in the Lord, for by it you will gain honor. Now behold, I know that Simeon your brother is wise in counsel. Always listen to him. he shall be your father. Judas Maccabeus had been a mighty warrior from his youth. He shall command the army for you and fight the battle against the people. You shall rally about, you who all observe the law, and avenge the wrong done to your people. Pay back the Gentiles in full and heed what the Lord commands. Then he blessed them and was gathered to his fathers. He died in the 146th year and was buried in the tomb of his father at Medine, and all Israel mourned for him with great lamentation. So that's amazing, brothers and sisters, and I'm going to read the next chapter because you see how this all comes into play. But this is literally, this is literally happening right before our eyes, brothers and sisters, that these people are attacking on the Sabbath day. And I just wanted to mention that the book of Maccabees was taken out during the American Revolution. And you can see here why they did that, because the powers that be do not want you to know that you can fight. They don't want you to know that if you fight and stand for the Almighty God, then you have the whole host of heavens behind you. So we're going to go to Maccabee 3 now. Then Judas and his son, who was called Maccabeus, took command in his place, and all his brothers and all who joined his fathers helped him. They gladly fought for Israel. He extended the glory of his people like a giant. He put on his breastplate. He girded on his armor of war and waged battles, protecting the host by his sword. He was like a lion in his deeds and like a lion's cub roaring for prey. He searched out and pursued the lawless, and he burned those who troubled his people. Lawless men shrank back for fear of him, and all the evildoers were confounded, and deliverance prospered by his hand. He embittered many kings, but he made Jacob glad by his deeds, and his memory is blessed forever. He went through the cities of Judah, and he destroyed the ungodly out of the land. Thus he turned away the wrath from Israel. He was renowned to the ends of the earth, and he gathered in those who were perishing. But Apollonius gathered together Gentiles and a large force from Samaria to fight against Israel. Apollonius, wow. When Judas learned of it, he went out to meet him, and he defeated and killed him. Many were wounded and fell, and the rest fled. Then they seized their spoils, and Judas took the sword of Apollonius and used it in the battle for the rest of his life. That's got to be interesting, the sword of Apollonius. I bet you that's something highly significant. And we're going to quickly search for that. We'll get back to this. Now when Syrian, the commander of the Syrian army, heard that Judas had gathered a large army, including a body of faithful men who stayed with him and went out to battle, he said, I will make a name for myself and win honor in the kingdom. I will make war on Judas and his companions who scorned the king's command. And again, a strong army of ungodly men went up to him to help him to take vengeance on the sons of Israel. When he approached the ascent of Beth-horon, Judas went out to meet him with a small company. But when they saw the army coming to meet them, they said to Judas, How can we, few as we are, fight against so great and strong a multitude? And we are faint, for we have eaten nothing today. Judas replied, It is easy for many to be hemmed in by a few, for in the sight of heaven there is no difference between saving by many or by few. It is not the size of the army that victory in battle depends, but the strength that comes from heaven. Amen. They came against us in great pride and lawfulness to destroy us and their wives and their children, and to despoil us. And doesn't this remind you of the 12 spies that went out, and the 10 of them came back with a bad report? And Jacob and Caleb were like, no, we can do it. We've got the whole army of God that's going to fight for us. But the other 10 were like, no, they're huge. We're like grasshoppers to them. So they came against us in great pride and lawlessness to destroy us. and our wives and our children, and to despoil us, but we fight for our lives and our laws. He himself will crush them before us, as you do. Do not be afraid of them." When he's finished speaking, he rushed suddenly against Syrian and his army, and they were crushed before him. They pursued them down to the descent of Beth-horon to the plain. 800 of them fell, and the rest fled into the land of the Philistines. Then Judas and his brothers began to be feared, and terror fell upon the Gentiles round about them. His fame reached the king, and the Gentiles talked of battles of Judas. When King Antiochus heard these reports, he was greatly angered, and he sent and gathered all the forces of his kingdom, a very strong army. And he opened his coffers and gave a year's pay to his forces, and ordered them to be ready for any need. Then he saw that the money in the treasury was exhausted, and that the revenues from the countries were small because of the dissension and disaster which he had caused in the land by abolishing the laws that had existed from the earliest days. He feared that he might not have such funds as he had before his expenses, and for the gifts which he used to give more lavishly than preceding kings. He was greatly perplexed in mind, and determined to go into Persia to collect the revenues from those regions and raise a large fund. He left Lysias, and a distinguished man of royal lineage, in charge of the king's affair from the river Euphrates to the border of Egypt. Lysias was also to take care of Antiochus his son until he returned, and he turned over to Lysias half of his troops and the elephants, and gave him orders about all that he wanted done for the residents of Judea and Jerusalem. Lysias was to send a force against them to wipe out and destroy the strength of Israel and the remnant of Jerusalem. He was to banish the memory of them from that place, settle aliens in all their territory, and distribute their land. Then the king took the remaining half of his troops and departed from Antiochus, his capital, in the 147th year. He crossed the Euphrates River and went through the upper provinces. Lysias chose Ptolemy the son of Dorymenes and Nicanor and Gorgias, mighty men among the friends of the king, and sent them 40,000 infantry and 7,000 cavalry to go into the land of Judea and destroy it, as the king had commanded. So they departed with the entire force, and when they arrived, they encamped near Emmaus in the plain. When the traders of the region heard what was said to them, they took the silver and the gold in immense amounts and fetters, and went to the camp to get the sons of Israel for slaves. And forces from Syria and the land of Philistine joined them. Now Judas and his brothers saw that the misfortune had increased, and that the forces were encamped in their territory. They had also learned what the king had commanded to do to the people to cause their final destruction. But they said one to another, "Let us repair the destruction of our people, and fight for our people and the sanctuary." And the congregation assembled to be ready for battle, and to pray and ask for mercy and compassion. Jerusalem was uninhabited like a wilderness. Not one of her children went in or out. The sanctuary was trampled down, and the sons of aliens held in the citadel. It was for a lodging place for the Gentiles. Joy was taken from Jacob. The flute and the harp ceased to play. Wow, that's in Joel too. So they assembled and went to Mizpah opposite Jerusalem, because Israel formerly had a place of prayer in Mizpah. They fasted that day. They put on sackcloth and sprinkled ashes on their heads and rent their clothes. And they opened the book of the law to inquire into those matters about which the Gentiles were consulting the images of their idols. They also brought the garments of the priesthood and the first fruits and the tithes, and they stirred up the Nazarites who had completed their days, and they cried aloud to heaven, saying, "What shall we do with these? Where shall we take them? Thy sanctuaries trampled down and profaned, and thy priests mourn in humiliation. And behold, the Gentiles are assembled against us to destroy us. Thou knowest what they plot against us. How will we be able to withstand them if you do not help us? Then they sounded the trumpets and gave a loud shout. After this, Judas appointed leaders of the people in charge of thousands and hundreds and fifties and tens. And he said to those who were building houses, or who were betrothed, or who were planting vineyards, or who were faint-hearted, that each should return to his home according to the law. Then the army marched out and encamped to the south of Emmaus. And Judas said, Gird yourself and be valiant. Be ready early in the morning to fight with these Gentiles who have assembled against us to destroy us and our sanctuary. It is better for us to die in battle than to see the misfortunes of our nation and of the sanctuary. But as his will in heaven may be, so he will do. Brothers and sisters, this is absolutely incredible. This is such a mirror of Matthew 24, of Joel 2, of Revelation 9. It's unbelievable. All right. Now Georgius took 5,000 infantry and 1,000 pickled cavalry, and this division moved out by night to fall upon the camp of the Jews and to attack them suddenly. Men from the Catadel were his guides, but Judas heard of it, and he and his mighty men moved out to attack the king's force in Emmaus, while the division was still absent from the camp. When Georgius entered the camp of Judas by night, he found no one there. So he looked for them in the hills, because he said, These men are fleeing from us. At daybreak, Judas appeared in the plains with 3,000 men, but they did not have armour and swords such as they desired. And they saw the camp of the Gentiles strong and fortified with cavalry round about it, and these men were trained in war. But Judas said to the men who were with him, Do not fear their numbers or be afraid when they charge. Remember how our fathers were saved at the Red Sea when Pharaoh and his forces pursued them. Now let us cry to heaven and see whether he will favour us, and remember his covenant with our fathers, and crush this army before us today. Then all the Gentiles will know that there is one who redeems and saves Israel. When the foreigners looked up and saw them coming against them, they went forth from their camp to battle. Then the men with Judas blew their trumpets and engaged in battle. The Gentiles were crushed and fled into the plain, and those who were at the rear fell by the sword. They pursued them to Gazara and to the plains of Idumea and to Azotus and Gimnea, and 3,000 of them fell. And Judas and his force turned back from pursuing them, and he said to the people, Do not be greedy for plunder, for there is a battle before us. Gorgias and his force are near us in the hills, but stand now against our enemies and fight them, and afterwards seize the plunder boldly. Just as Judas was finished speaking, a detachment appeared, coming out of the hills. They saw that their army had been put to flight, and that the Jews were burning the camp, for the smoke that was seen showed what had happened. When they perceived this, they were greatly frightened, and when they also saw the army of Judas drawn up in the plains for battle, they all fled into the land of the Philistines. Then Judas returned to plunder the camp, and they seized much gold and silver, and clothes dyed blue and sea purple, and great riches. On their return they sung hymns and praises to heaven, for he is good, for his mercies endure forever. Thus Israel had a great deliverance that day. For those of the foreigners who escaped went and reported to Lysias all that had happened. When he'd heard it, he was perplexed and discouraged, for the things had not happened to Israel as he had intended, nor had they turned out as the king had commanded him. But the next year he mustered 60,000 picked infantrymen and 5,000 cavalry to subdue them. And they came to Abdami and encamped at Bethzor, and Judas met them with 10,000 men. When he saw that the army was strong, he prayed, saying, Blessed art thou, O Saviour of Israel, who didst crush the attack of the mighty warrior by the hand of the servant David, and didst give the camp of the Philistines into the hands of Jonathan the son of Saul, and of the man who carried his armour. So do thou hem in this army by the hand of the people of Israel, and let them be ashamed of their troops and their cavalry. Fill them with cowardice, melt their boldness of their strength, let them tremble in their destruction, strike them down with the sword of those who love thee, and let all who know thy name praise thee with hymns. Then both sides attacked, and there fell of the army of Lysias 5,000 men. They fell in action. And when Lysias saw the rout of his troops and observed the boldness of which inspired those of Judas, and how ready they were to either live or die nobly, he departed to Antioch and enlisted mercenaries to invade Judea again with an even larger army. Then said Judas and his brother, Behold, our enemies are crushed. Let us go up to cleanse the sanctuary and dedicate it. So all the army assembled, and they went up to Mount Zion. And they saw the sanctuary desolate, the altar profaned, and the gates burned. In the courts they saw bushes sprung up as a thicket, or as one of the mountains, and they saw the chambers of the priests in ruin. They rent their clothes and mourned with great lamentation, and sprinkled themselves with ashes. They fell face down on the ground, and sounded the signal of the trumpets, and cried out to heaven. Then Judas detailed men to fight against those Catadel until he had cleansed the sanctuary. He chose blameless priests devout to the law, and they cleansed the sanctuary and removed the defiled stones, interesting, to an unclean place. They deliberated what to do about the altar of burnt offering which had been profaned, and they thought it best to tear it down, lest it bring reproach upon them, for the Gentiles had defiled it. So they tore down the altar and stored the stones in a convenient place on the temple hill until there should come a prophet to tell what to do with them. I wonder, brothers and sisters, if that stone is what is in the Kaaba now. Oh my goodness, wow. And they took unhewn stones, as the law directs, and built a new altar like the former one. And they had rebuilt the sanctuary and the interior of the temple, and consecrated the courts. They made new holy vessels, and brought the lampstands and the altar of incense and the table into the temple. They burnt the incense on the altar and lighted the lamps of the lampstand, and they gave light in the temple. They placed the bread on the table and hung up the curtains. Thus they finished all the work they had undertaken. Early in the morning on the 25th day of the 9th month, which is the month of Chislev, in the year 148 years, they rose and offered sacrifice as the Lord directs, on the new altar of burnt offerings which they built. At the very season, on the very day that the Gentiles had profaned it, it was dedicated with songs and harps and lutes and cymbals. All of the people fell on their faces and worshipped and blessed heaven, who had prospered them. So they celebrated the dedication of the altar for 8 days, and offered burnt offerings with gladness, and they offered a sacrifice of deliverance and praise. They decorated the front of the temple with golden crowns and small shields. They restored the gates and the chambers for the priest, and furnished them with doors. There was a very great gladness among the people, and the reproach of the Gentiles was removed. Then Judas and his brothers and all the assembly of Israel determined that every year at that season the days of dedication of the altar should be observed with gladness and joy for 8 days, beginning with the 25th of the month of Kislev. At that time they fortified Mount Zion with high walls and strong towers round about, to keep the Gentiles from coming and trampling them down as they had done before, and he stationed a garrison there to hold it. He also fortified Bethsur so that the people might have a stronghold that faced Idmir. Wow, brothers and sisters, that was incredible. So the very same day that the Gentiles had profaned the temple with the erection of Zeus on the 15th of Kislev, and then 10 days later, the slaughter of the pig on the altar on the 25th day of the 9th month. You know, this feast of dedication, as I've done a video about it a month ago or so, when I was talking about a December deliverance, December rapture, I did some research and found that the Feast of Dedication was also the Feast of the Dedication of the Temple, and not just Hanukkah. It was all to do with the tabernacles and true tabernacles. And so this is, you know, and what a wonderful thing that these people stood valiantly for the Lord, right? And the army of the host of heavens fought for them. And it just, this is exactly like, because if you were to read Matthew 24 and Luke Mark 13, and it says, you know, when you therefore see the abomination of desolation standing where it ought not, then flee to the mountains. What is it? You go and read the book of Daniel, and there's 3 instances of the abomination of desolation, but it's very vague on what that actually is. So just reading this now, because it's been a little while since I've read this, knowing what I know now about that stone and about what I believe Father has shown me, to, you know, what's underneath that Kaaba in Mecca, the temple statue of Baal, and that stone that's in the Kaaba. You know, that they believe that that's a meteorite that fell from heaven. Exactly what's written, you know, in Acts 19. This is what the town of Ephesians were worshipping. They were worshipping an image that fell down from Jupiter. It's all to do with the image. Okay? It's all leading into the mark of the beast. Because that's what they're worshipping. They're not worshipping the beast. They're worshipping the image of the beast. So this is incredible, brothers and sisters. So I thought I would add on to Brother Steve's video what he showed, and the fact that there is some very significant evidence. And like I said, it was the only feast that Christ attended. And, you know, it says that he escaped out of it too. So let's have a look at this. Let's see if we can see the sword. The sword of Apollonius. I wonder if there's anything. Just have a quick little look. Here we are. It's probably something like, what do you call it? King Arthur's sword, you know. I'd just like to see if there's a picture of it. Oh. It'd be very interesting to look into this a little bit more. I think there's that sword's probably, you know, that sword is probably around still to this day. It's probably like the sword in the stone or something like that. But anyway, brothers and sisters, I thought I would do that reading of the book of Maccabees, because I just think it's highly important that to know what the original Abomination of Desolation is, and you can see how everything's fitting into the timeline now. You know, everything's like literally slipping on like a sock, that these things are all coming in together. We've got the war, we've got the armies surrounding Jerusalem. You know, we've got the Abomination of Desolation very close. It looks like Father's revealed who the Antichrist might be. You know, and the mark of the beast again, the 666, which is really an Arabic symbol of Chi, Si, Sigma, in the name of Allah. It just seems to be all being revealed now. So this is why I still want to continue to have hope, And I just do not think that we would be able to know these things or these things be uncovered if we were still years off. We have the promise, we have the surety of Almighty God that He will deliver us. He will spare us from the hour of trial, and that Christ told us to pray to be found worthy to escape all, not just some, all of the things that are coming upon this earth. So, I don't take these things lightly. I truly believe in the redeeming power and the salvation and the sparing and the escape that is promised, by our loving Saviour, Yeshua Jesus Christ, and by His Almighty Father. So I thought I'll leave you with that, brothers and sisters. I just thought it'd be good to hear the book of Maccabees, and now you know where the Abomination of Desolation comes from, why Hanukkah is so important, and this is probably why Christmas came about too, because they wanted to, just like Thanksgiving, Thanksgiving could be tabernacles. It seems to me it's becoming pretty obvious that all the Western feasts are cover up for Father's feasts. Okay, so, and I'm going to turn your feast into mourning, and it would be a great mourning for the, those people who call themselves Jews, but they're not. So there's a lot of stuff happening at the moment, brothers and sisters, and all you need to do is keep your lamps full of hope, trust, belief and faith. Keep joyful, love one another, be patient, be kind, spread the word, the good word of the gospel, the good news of salvation. That is our only job to do right now, and to just love one another and encourage one another in these times. All right, brothers and sisters, I love you very much, and I hope this has blessed you as it has me. And please write in the comments if you can add anything onto this, or if you noticed anything as I was reading. I'd love to hear it so I can do some more study on this, because I just, I want to go back and read that again, because there was so many things I wanted to stop, but I didn't want to keep interrupting and, having a rant for 5 minutes about something. But there was so much in that story that sounds like, Joel 2 and Matthew 24, and, it's going hand in hand with the end times. So very, very exciting. All right, I love you, brothers and sisters, and if I don't see you in the next video, I will see you in the skies. Bye.